The red warning lights flashed across the command center as another explosion shook the walls. Commander Zathara pressed her crystalline hand against the metal table, trying to keep herself steady. The reports coming in were all the same. But news. Very bad news. Commander, we just lost contact with the northern defense grid, Lieutenant Vexra said, his voice shaking. The young officer's blue skin had turned pale with fear. The Vorthak are pushing through our lines. Zathara closed her large silver eyes and took a deep breath. For 3 months, she had watched the Galactic Defense Coalition fall apart piece by piece. 12 different alien races had joined together to fight the Vorthak Empire. Now only scattered, groups remained, hiding in bunkers and caves across the galaxy. The Vorthak were unlike anything the galaxy had ever seen. They looked like giant insects but fought with the intelligence of the smartest species. Their black ships moved through space like living creatures. Their soldiers wore armor that changed and adapted to any weapon fired at it. Energy blasts that should have killed them only made their armor stronger. What about the Hydronian fleet? Zathara asked, though she already knew the answer would be terrible. Gone, Commander, Captain Mortek replied from his station. The large, rock-like being's voice was heavy with sadness. Admiral Blue Wave sent a final message before his flagship was destroyed. The entire fleet is lost. Zathara felt something, cold settle in her stomach. The Hydronians had the most powerful ships in the coalition. Their water-based technology could create energy shields strong enough to stop small moons. If the Vorthak had destroyed them, what hope did anyone else have? Another explosion rocked the command center, this one much closer. Dust fell from the ceiling as the lights flickered. Through the large windows, Zathara could see the dark shapes of Vorthak ships moving across the orange sky of Kepler 442b. Their world was beautiful, covered in purple forests and silver lakes. Soon it would be just another dead rock under Vorthak control. Commander, incoming transmission from the Mentari survivors, Communications Officer Yilsa announced. The small, floating alien's mental voice echoed in everyone's head. They say, the Vorthak have learned to block their mind powers. The psychic attacks aren't working anymore. That was the final blow. The Mentari were the Coalition's secret weapon. They could reach into enemy minds and cause confusion or fear. Some of the strongest Mentari could even make enemies turn on each other. But the Vorthak had adapted to that too, just like they adapted to everything else. Zathara walked to the main display screen. It showed a map of their sector, with red marks indicating Vorthak positions. The red was everywhere now, like a disease spreading across the galaxy. Only a few small green dots remained, showing the last free coalition bases. How many ships do we have left? She asked. 17, Commander, Captain Mortek answered. Most are damaged. We have maybe 6 that can still fight. 17 ships. Zathara remembered when they had started this war with over 3,000 vessels. The coalition had been so confident. They had better technology, smarter leaders, and the moral right to defend their homes. None of that had mattered against the Vorthak's endless numbers and their ability to learn from every battle. The ground shook again, and this time the lights went out completely. Emergency power kicked in a few seconds later, bathing everything in dim red light. Through the windows, Zathara could see bright flashes in the sky as the last coalition ships tried to fight off the Vorthak landing craft. Commander, we're receiving surrender demands from the Vorthak Queen Mind, Yilsa reported. They want all remaining coalition forces to lay down their weapons. What do they offer in return? Zathara asked, though she already knew. Slavery for the survivors. Death for the leaders. Zathara nodded. It was the same offer the Vorthak had made to every world they conquered. They didn't destroy planets entirely. They kept the populations alive to work in their biofactories, turning living beings into fuel for their war machine. It was worse than death. Commander, Lieutenant Vexra said quietly, there might be one option left. Everyone in the command center turned to look at the young officer. His hands were shaking as he worked at his control panel. I've been scanning for any coalition signals across the galaxy, he continued. Most sectors are dark now, but I found something interesting in the old database. There's a planet called Earth in the outer rim. The species there applied to join the coalition about 10 years ago. Captain Mortek made a grinding sound that was his people's version of laughter. You mean those primitive humans? The Council rejected them. They were too violent and chaotic for Coalition membership. Yes, sir, but they're still alive. My scans show they have some kind of space travel technology. Maybe not as advanced as ours, but they have ships, they have weapons. Zathara felt a tiny spark of something she hadn't felt in weeks. Not hope exactly, but maybe the possibility of hope. Can you reach them? I can try, Commander, but the message would have to travel through several Vorthak-controlled systems. There's no guarantee it would get through. Another explosion, much closer this time. Zathara could hear the sound of energy weapons firing in the corridors outside. The command center. The Vorthak ground forces had reached their building. Do it, she ordered. Send the message to Earth. Tell them what's happening. Tell them the galaxy needs help. Lieutenant Vexra's hands flew over his controls. What should I say about the humans being rejected from the Coalition? Zathara thought about that for a moment. The Council had said humans were too aggressive, too unpredictable, too willing to fight when they should negotiate. Those had seemed like terrible qualities for a peaceful alliance. Now, facing extinction, those same qualities might be exactly what the galaxy needed. Tell them the truth, she said. Tell them we were wrong to reject them. Tell them we need soldiers now, not diplomats. The door to the command center exploded inward. Black-armored Vorthak soldiers poured through the opening, their insect-like faces hidden behind glowing red visors. Energy weapons hummed as they charged up for firing. Message sent, Commander, Vexra shouted over the noise. Zathara smiled as she reached for her sidearm. At least they had tried. Somewhere in the darkness of space, a desperate plea for help was racing toward a small blue planet called Earth. She just hoped the humans were as fierce as the Coalition had feared. The energy weapons fired and everything went white. 3 weeks after the last Coalition message went silent, the emergency session at Earth Defense Command was the most important meeting in human history. Admiral Marcus Kane stood at the head of the long table, watching the faces of Earth's military leaders as they processed what they had just heard. Let me make sure I understand this correctly, General Patricia Webb said, her voice tight with disbelief. 12 alien races that rejected us for being too violent are now asking us to save them from bugs? Giant space bugs with adaptive armor and planet-killing fleets, why? Colonel Danny Rodriguez corrected from his seat. According to the message, they've wiped out most of the galaxy already. Admiral Kane nodded grimly. The message from Commander Zathara had taken 3 weeks to reach Earth, bouncing through damaged relay stations and avoiding Vorthak patrols. The translation computers had worked around the clock to decode it. What they found was a desperate plea for help from a dying civilization. Sir, with respect, this could be a trap, Captain Lisa Hayes said. The young woman commanded Earth's newest stealth destroyer and was known for her careful thinking. We don't know these aliens. They could be lying to get us to expose our fleet. They could be, Kane agreed. But the message included star charts, tactical data, and even samples of Vorthak communication patterns. Either they're telling the truth or this is the most elaborate lie in galactic history. Dr. Nathan Cross, Earth's top alien expert, cleared his throat. I've analyzed the biological data they sent about the Vorthak. These creatures are unlike anything we've ever seen. They're part organic, part machine, and they learn from every battle. The Coalition forces used energy weapons that the Vorthak adapted to. Their ships became immune to the same attacks after just a few encounters. What about our weapons? General Webb asked. Dr. Cross smiled for the first time since the meeting began. That's where it gets interesting. The Coalition species all developed similar technology. Clean energy, precise targeting, minimal collateral damage, very civilized. We humans took a different path. Lieutenant Colonel Amy Rodriguez leaned forward in her chair. Amy was Danny's daughter and had earned her rank leading the toughest Marine units on Earth. You mean our weapons are too primitive for them to adapt to? Not primitive, Dr. Cross corrected. Different. When the Coalition sees a problem, they try to solve it with more advanced technology. When humans see a problem, We try to solve it with bigger explosions. Admiral Kane activated the holographic display in the center of the table. It showed the current layout of human space forces. Earth had 57 major warships, 200 smaller vessels, and about 30,000 trained soldiers. Compared to the thousands of ships the Coalition had lost, it wasn't much. Admiral, our fleet is tiny compared to what the aliens had, Captain Hayes pointed out. If they couldn't stop these Vorthak, how can we? Kane was quiet for a moment, thinking about the battles he had fought during Earth's last Great War. Humans had learned some hard lessons about fighting when outnumbered and outgunned. Sometimes the answer wasn't having better weapons. Sometimes the answer was using your weapons in ways the enemy never expected. Captain, do you remember the Battle of Titan Station? He asked. Hayes nodded. Everyone in the room remembered that fight. Pirates had taken over the mining station with superior ships and weapons. The Earth fleet was outnumbered 3-1. Instead of a direct assault, Admiral Kane had used mining charges to blow up asteroids, creating a debris field that crippled the pirate ships. Then his forces had attacked while the pirates were blind and confused. The Coalition fought the Vorthak like a traditional space navy, Kane continued. Fleet against fleet, ship against ship. They played by the rules of honorable warfare. The Vorthak adapted to their tactics because those tactics were predictable. And you want us to fight dirty, Lieutenant Colonel Rodriguez said with a grin. Amy had inherited her father's love of unconventional warfare. I want us to fight like humans, Kane replied. The message said the Vorthak have a hive mind. They coordinate perfectly, adapt quickly, and learn from every battle. But that also means they think in patterns. If we can break those patterns, confuse their coordination, we might have a chance. General Webb looked skeptical. You're talking about taking 57 ships against an empire that destroyed thousands. That's not brave, Admiral. That's suicide. Kane pulled up another display showing the Vorthak advance through Coalition space. The pattern was clear. The aliens moved methodically from system to system, consolidating their gains before moving forward. They were intelligent, organized, and thorough. Look at their pattern, he said. They expect resistance at certain points. Fortified worlds, military bases, major shipyards. They've planned for conventional defense strategies. But what if we don't defend anything? What if we attack where they don't expect it? Captain Hayes studied the display. Hit-and-run tactics, strike their supply lines, communication nodes, isolated outposts. Make them spread their forces thin trying to protect everything. Exactly. And we use weapons they can't adapt to because they've never seen them before. Kinetic rounds, chemical explosives, nuclear warheads, old-fashioned human firepower. Dr. Cross nodded enthusiastically. The tactical data shows the Vorthak have never encountered projectile weapons. Their armor adapts to energy by absorbing and redirecting it. But a simple bullet doesn't give them energy to absorb. It just punches a hole. Colonel Rodriguez laughed. So we're going to save the galaxy with guns and bombs? If it works, Kane replied. The Coalition tried to fight monsters by being more civilized. We're going to fight monsters by being more monstrous. Lieutenant Colonel Rodriguez stood up from her chair. Admiral, my Marines are ready. We've been training for alien contact scenarios for years. Give us a chance to show these bugs what human soldiers can do. One by one, the other officers voiced their agreement. They knew the odds were terrible. They knew most of them probably wouldn't come home. But they also knew that somewhere in the galaxy, entire civilizations were dying while waiting for help that might never come. Admiral Kane looked around the table at the faces of Earth's defenders. These men and women represented the best of humanity's military forces. They were volunteers who had sworn to protect Earth and human interests. Now they were being asked to protect species they had never met, on worlds they had never seen. I won't lie to you, Kane said. This mission is probably suicide. We're outgunned, outnumbered, and fighting an enemy we barely understand. But if we don't try, the entire galaxy falls to these creatures, and eventually, they'll come for Earth. 2. General Webb was the last to speak. How long do we have to prepare? The Vorthak are moving toward the last Coalition strongholds, Kane replied. If we're going to help, we need to leave within the week. That gives us 7 days to prepare for the longest shot in human history. Captain Hayes smiled grimly. 7 days to save the galaxy. No pressure. As the meeting broke up, each officer began planning for their part in the mission. They would take every available ship, every trained soldier, and every weapon Earth could spare. It wasn't enough to fight a conventional war against the Vorthak Empire, but humans had never been very good at conventional warfare anyway. They were better at improvising, adapting, and refusing to quit even when logic said they should surrender. If the galaxy needed heroes, it was going to get something better. It was going to get human soldiers who were too stubborn to know when they were beaten. The Vorthak Queen Mind felt confusion for the first time in 1,000 years. From her massive bioship at the center of the fleet, she processed reports that made no sense. The new enemy wasn't fighting like the coalition species. They weren't even fighting like any intelligent race should fight. "Show me the attack patterns again," she commanded her drone controllers through the hive link that connected all Vorthak minds. The holographic display showed the recent battle at the Kepler system. The Queen Mind expected to see the familiar pattern of enemy ships approaching in formation, exchanging fire at maximum range, then retreating when their shields failed. Instead, she saw chaos. The human ships had appeared from inside the asteroid belt where they had been hiding for days. But they didn't attack the Vorthak battle fleet. Instead, they targeted the fuel depots on the outer planets, destroying the biomatter storage facilities that kept the Vorthak ships running. "This makes no strategic sense," the Queen Mind broadcast to her fleet commanders. "They ignored our strongest ships to attack empty storage tanks." What she didn't understand was that Admiral Kane had studied every coalition battle report. He knew the Vorthak were like sharks, constantly moving and feeding. Cut off their food supply, and they became desperate and sloppy. Captain Lisa Hayes smiled as she watched her torpedoes impact the third fuel depot. Her stealth ship, the Phantom, had been drifting through the asteroid field for 6 days, powered down and hidden among the rocks. The Vorthak sensors were designed to detect energy signatures and movement. They couldn't find a ship that was pretending to be a dead rock. "Target destroyed, Admiral," she reported over the tight beam communication link, moving to secondary position. "Good work, Phantom," Kane's voice crackled back. "Thunderstrike, you're up." 3 systems away, Lieutenant Colonel Amy Rodriguez felt the familiar weight of her combat armor as the assault ship Thunderstrike approached the occupied world of Nexus Prime. The planet's surface was covered with Vorthak fortifications, black towers that pulsed with organic energy. Any normal military force would try to destroy those towers with orbital bombardment. Amy had a different plan. "Remember, Marines," she told her soldiers over the comm system, "we're not here to fight fair, we're here to win. The mining equipment goes in first, then we follow." The Thunderstrike's cargo bay opened, and dozens of automated mining drones dropped toward the planet's surface. The Vorthak defenders watched in confusion as the strange machines landed far from their fortifications and began digging into the rocky ground. "What are they doing?" Sub-Queen Vexilla asked through the hive link. "Those machines are not weapons." The Queen Mind studied the scene through her drone's eyes. The human machines were indeed mining equipment, designed to tunnel through asteroids. But why would the humans waste time digging holes when they should be attacking the fortifications? The answer came 6 hours later when Amy's Marines emerged. From tunnels directly underneath the Vorthak command center, the aliens had perfect defenses against attacks from above, but they had never considered attacks from below. "Surprise, bugs," Sergeant Jake Morrison growled as he fired his railgun into the nearest Vorthak warrior. The kinetic round punched through the alien's adaptive armor like it was made of paper. The armor tried to adapt to the energy of the impact, but there was no energy to adapt to. Just a chunk of metal moving very fast. The Vorthak warriors in the command center had never experienced fear. Their hive mind shared courage and determination across all members. But as human soldiers poured out of the ground like angry ants firing weapons that their armor couldn't stop, something new entered the hive link. Panic. "Impossible," the Queen Mind broadcast. "Their weapons are primitive. Our armor adapts to all energy-based attacks." "These aren't energy weapons, Your Majesty." Sub-Queen Vexilla replied, her mental voice tight with pain as another railgun round tore through her bodyguard. They're throwing metal at us. Very fast metal. The Queen Mind processed this information. In all her centuries of conquest, she had never encountered a species that used projectile weapons in space warfare. Energy was cleaner, more efficient, more precise. Only primitive species used crude kinetic weapons, but primitive didn't mean ineffective. On the surface of Nexus Prime, Amy's Marines moved through the Vorthak fortifications like a wrecking crew. Their weapons were loud, messy, and completely unpredictable. Explosive charges brought down biotowers that had withstood Coalition energy weapons for months. Flamethrowers burned through organic walls that were supposed to be fireproof. Rodriguez, to Thunderstrike, Amy called as her team secured the main communication hub. Package delivered. The bugs are running scared. Sergeant Morrison kicked down the door to what looked like a Vorthak barracks. Inside, dozens of warrior drones were connected to feeding tubes, recharging their bioenergy. He pulled the pins on 3 grenades and tossed them into the room. "Sleep tight, uglies," he said, closing the door just before the explosion shook the building. The psychological effect was even more devastating than the physical damage. The Vorthak had never fought an enemy that seemed to enjoy causing chaos. Coalition forces fought with discipline and honor, even when losing. These humans fought like they were having fun. Back in space, Admiral Kane watched the tactical display as his hit-and-run attacks spread confusion through the Vorthak fleet. The aliens were trying to respond to multiple threats at once, but their coordination was breaking down. "Sir, we're receiving strange transmissions from the Vorthak ships," Communications Officer Davis reported. "It sounds like they're arguing with each other." Kane smiled. The hive mind that made the Vorthak so dangerous in normal warfare was becoming a weakness. When panic spread through their mental network, it affected every drone at once. They were no longer thinking as one coordinated force. They were thinking as thousands of confused individuals. "Admiral, this is Phantom," Captain Hayes reported. "I'm tracking a Vorthak patrol moving toward our position, but they're not moving in formation. They're scattered all over the place." "Confirmed, Phantom. It looks like their coordination is breaking down. All ships continue hit-and-run attacks. Don't give them time to reorganize." Dr. Nathan Cross, monitoring the battle from Earth, was fascinated by what he was seeing. "Admiral, the Vorthak hive mind appears to be experiencing what we might call a panic attack. Their shared consciousness is spreading fear faster than they can process it." On Nexus Prime, Amy's Marines had captured the main Vorthak command center. The organic computers still pulsed with alien life, but the warrior drones who operated them were either dead or fleeing in disorder. "Ma'am, you need to see this," Corporal Lisa Park called from one of the bioterminals. She was one of the few Marines who could read the translated Vorthak symbols. According to these logs, this system was supposed to be fully secured. They had it marked as a safe zone for their fleet operations. Amy looked at the display showing Vorthak ship movements. The neat formations were gone, replaced by scattered vessels fleeing toward the edge of the system. "Not so safe anymore, is it?" The Queen Mind tried to restore order to her forces, but the damage was spreading. Her perfect coordination was breaking down as individual drones began making their own decisions. Some were retreating without orders. Others were attacking random targets. A few were even questioning whether the conquest was necessary at all. "All units return to formation," she broadcast. "These humans are just another primitive species. We will adapt to their weapons as we have to all others." But even as she gave the order, the Queen Mind felt something she had never experienced before. Doubt. The humans weren't fighting like any species in the database. They didn't follow the logical patterns of warfare. They attacked weakness instead of strength, used chaos instead of order, and seemed to thrive on confusion. For the first time in her long existence, the Queen Mind wondered if the Vorthak Empire had finally met an enemy they couldn't defeat. In the ruins of the command center on Nexus Prime, Amy Rodriguez stood among the wreckage of Vorthak equipment and smiled. Her Marines were already preparing charges to destroy what was left of the facility. "This is just the beginning, Bugs," she said to the empty air. "Welcome to human warfare." Commander Zethara couldn't believe what she was seeing through the cracked view screen of her hidden shelter. Above the ice world of Titan's Edge, human ships were fighting alongside the few remaining coalition vessels. But they weren't just fighting. They were winning. The humans have been at this for 2 weeks now, Captain Mortek said, his rocky voice filled with amazement. Look at how they move. No formation, no pattern, just pure chaos. Zathara watched as a human destroyer called the Wolverine suddenly appeared from behind a moon, fired everything it had at a Vorthak cruiser, then disappeared back into the shadows before the enemy could respond. The Vorthak ship tried to follow, but 2 more human vessels emerged from different directions, hitting it with weapons that tore through its adaptive armor like tissue paper. They're teaching our people to fight like them, Lieutenant Vexera observed. He had survived the fall of their homeworld and joined the human fleet a week ago. Yesterday, Captain Hayes showed me how to use asteroid fields for cover. She said hiding isn't cowardly if you're planning to stab the enemy in the back. News of human victories was spreading to coalition survivors across the galaxy. On the water world of Aquarius 7, Admiral Blue Wave's younger brother, Captain Riptide, led a group of Hydronian refugees in their first joint operation with human forces. They had always fought with honor, meeting enemies face-to-face in open battle. The humans taught them a different way. Remember, Sergeant Morrison explained to the mixed group of human Marines and alien survivors, we don't want a fair fight. Fair fights are for sports, not wars. We want every advantage we can get. The target was a Vorthak biofactory on the planet's main continent. The facility was heavily defended with energy shields and warrior drones. A traditional assault would cost hundreds of lives and probably fail. The human plan was typically insane. You want us to poison their water supply? Captain Riptide asked, his gills fluttering with confusion. That's not honorable combat. Morrison grinned and patted the aquatic alien on his scaled shoulder. Honor doesn't win wars, Captain. Results do. Your people can swim through their water intake pipes. My people will create a distraction at the main gate. When their defenses are focused on us, you hit them where they don't expect it. Dr. Nathan Cross had made his most important discovery while studying captured Vorthak equipment on Earth. The hive mind that controlled the Empire wasn't just biological. It was also technological, using quantum frequencies to link every Vorthak brain across vast distances. But that same network could be disrupted. Admiral Kane, I think I've found our secret weapon, Cross reported over the long-range communication system. The Vorthak share thoughts through quantum entanglement, but human brain patterns are completely different from anything in their database. If we can broadcast human thought patterns directly into their network, it might cause system-wide confusion. Kane was intrigued. What kind of human thought patterns? Everything that makes us chaotic, Cross replied with excitement. Music, jokes, random memories, emotional outbursts. Things that don't follow logical patterns. I've been working with the engineering team to build devices that can convert human brainwaves into quantum signals. The first test of the new weapon came during the battle for the mining world of Asteroid Prime. The Vorthak had turned the entire planetoid into a fortress, with thousands of warrior drones defending processing facilities that turned raw materials into biofuel for their fleet. Lieutenant Colonel Rodriguez led the assault team, each soldier carrying one of Dr. Cross's experimental devices. They looked like small radio sets, but instead of receiving signals, they broadcast the chaotic patterns of human consciousness directly into the Vorthak hive mind. All right, people, Amy announced, as the transport ships approached the fortress. Remember, we're not just fighting with bullets today, we're fighting with our thoughts. Think about everything that makes you human. Think about your favorite songs, your worst jokes, your most confusing memories. Private Tony Garcia activated his device and immediately began thinking about his grandmother's terrible cooking, the time he got lost in a shopping mall as a kid, and the lyrics to every heavy metal song he'd ever heard. The quantum transmitter converted these random thoughts into signals that invaded the Vorthak network. The effect was immediate and devastating. Vorthak drones across the fortress suddenly stopped what they were doing. Some began walking in circles. Others started making sounds that might have been attempts at singing. A few began arguing with invisible opponents. What's happening to them? Captain Riptide asked as he watched enemy warriors stumble around like they were drunk. They're experiencing human consciousness, Dr. Cross explained from his monitoring. Station. Their minds are designed for order and coordination. Human thoughts are chaotic, emotional, and completely unpredictable. It's like giving them mental indigestion. The Queen Mind felt the invasion of alien thoughts like a physical pain. Human memories flooded her consciousness. She saw images of small creatures called dogs, heard sounds called laughter, and experienced emotions that had no names in the Vorthak language. The orderly patterns of her hive mind became tangled with random human experiences. Stop the transmissions, she commanded her technical drones. Block the human signals, but it was too late. The chaos was spreading through the network faster than her technicians could respond. Across her empire, Vorthak drones were beginning to think individual thoughts. Some were questioning orders. Others were experiencing emotions they didn't understand. A few were even developing what humans called imagination. On Asteroid Prime, Amy's Marines advanced through the fortress, while Vorthak defenders wandered around in confusion. Some of the aliens were trying to dance to music that only existed in human memories. Others were laughing at jokes they didn't understand but somehow found funny. "This is too easy," Sergeant Morrison commented as he walked past a group of Vorthak warriors who were attempting to play what looked like a bizarre version of patty cake. "I almost feel sorry for them." "Don't," Amy replied, though she was also amazed by the scene. "They've destroyed entire civilizations. A little mental confusion is the least they deserve. The psychological warfare was working beyond everyone's expectations." Coalition survivors who had been hiding for months began to emerge from their shelters. They joined human forces in attacks on Vorthak positions, using the chaos-inducing devices to turn the aliens' greatest strength into their greatest weakness. Commander Zeth Ara stood on the bridge of a captured Vorthak ship, now crewed by a mixed force of humans and coalition survivors. She watched as Admiral Kane's fleet prepared for the final assault on the Vorthak home system. "Admiral," she said through the translation device, "my people owe you a debt we can never repay. You saved us when we had given up all hope." Kane looked at the tactical display showing the approaching battle. The Vorthak still had superior numbers and technology, but their coordination was breaking down. Individual ships were making their own decisions, sometimes contradicting orders from the Queen Mind. "Don't thank us yet, Commander," he replied. "The real fight is just beginning, but I think we've figured out how to beat them. We don't fight their strengths. We attack their weaknesses." Captain Hayes piloted the Phantom through the outer defenses of the Vorthak home system. Her ship was loaded with the most powerful chaos-inducing transmitters Dr. Cross could build. The plan was simple and completely insane, which made it perfectly human. "Phantom to all ships," she reported. "I'm beginning my run on the Queen Mind's flagship. If this works, their entire command structure should collapse. And if it doesn't work?" Lieutenant Colonel Rodriguez asked from her assault ship. Hayes smiled grimly as enemy fire began to fill the space around her ship. "Then we do this the hard way, just like humans always do." The battle for the galaxy's future was about to begin, and for the first time since the war started, the good guys had a real chance of winning. All because humanity had taught the galaxy something it had forgotten. Sometimes the best way to fight monsters isn't to be more civilized. Sometimes you have to be more monstrous. The Vorthak home system had never known the touch of war. For 1,000 years it had been the safe heart of an empire that conquered everything it touched. Now it burned with the fires of human weapons and the chaos of confused alien minds. "Admiral," Kane stood on the bridge of the UES Defiance, watching his fleet tear apart the most powerful military force in galactic history. But this wasn't a traditional space battle. This was something new, something the universe had never seen before. "Admiral, the Queen Mind's flagship is trying to retreat to the inner system," Captain Davis reported. "Should we pursue?" "Not yet," Kane replied, studying the tactical display. "Let her run. We want her scared and desperate. Scared enemies make mistakes." The Queen Mind's massive bioship, larger than most space stations, fled toward the safety of the inner planets. But there was no safety anywhere in her home system. Human ships appeared from impossible directions, striking at targets that made no military sense, then vanishing before her forces could respond. Captain Lisa Hayes pushed the Phantom harder than any ship was meant to be pushed. Her stealth destroyer had been modified with the most powerful chaos broadcasting equipment Dr. Cross could design. Every few minutes, she would decloak near a Vorthak vessel and flood their network with pure human insanity. "This is Phantom," she reported as another enemy cruiser began spinning in circles, its crew overwhelmed by memories of human birthday parties and baseball games. Target neutralized. Moving to next position. The psychological warfare was working better than anyone had hoped. Across the Vorthak fleet, individual ships were breaking away from formation. Some were attacking their own allies. Others were broadcasting what sounded like attempts at human music through their communication systems. "The hive mind is collapsing," Dr. Cross observed from his monitoring station aboard the Defiance. "Individual Vorthak are developing independent thought patterns. It's like watching an entire species wake up from a dream." On the Queen Mind's flagship, chaos reigned in ways the massive vessel had never experienced. Worker drones were painting colorful pictures on the walls instead of maintaining equipment. Warrior drones were asking philosophical questions instead of following orders. Some were even refusing to fight, claiming they had discovered something called pacifism. "Restore order," the Queen Mind commanded. But her own thoughts were becoming contaminated with human memories. She found herself humming a song called Yellow Submarine and couldn't understand why. Lieutenant Colonel Amy Rodriguez led the final assault on the Vorthak command ship. Her Marines had trained for this moment for weeks, studying the biological layout of the massive vessel. But they weren't planning to capture it. They were planning to give it the worst case of indigestion in galactic history. "Remember, people," Amy announced as the assault pods prepared to launch, "we're not trying to destroy this ship, we're trying to drive it completely insane." Sergeant Morrison checked his equipment one final time. Along with his usual weapons, he carried Dr. Cross's most advanced chaos inducer and a playlist of the most confusing human music ever recorded. "Ready to rock and roll, ma'am." The assault pods punched through the organic hull of the Queen Mind's ship like bullets through skin. Amy's Marines spread throughout the vessel, not to capture strategic positions but to plant chaos broadcasting devices in the ship's nervous system. The effect was immediate and devastating. The Queen Mind felt human thoughts flooding her consciousness at maximum intensity. She experienced childhood memories that weren't hers, laughed at jokes she didn't understand, and suddenly developed strong opinions about something called pizza toppings. "Stop this!" she screamed through the hive link, but her own voice was mixing with human thoughts. "We are Vorthak. We are unity. We are... Why do humans think cats are funny?" Sergeant Morrison planted his device directly in what the ship's schematics labeled as the primary neural cluster. As the transmitter activated, he could hear the organic walls around him starting to make sounds like laughter. "Package delivered," he reported. "This ship is about to have the weirdest day of its life." Throughout the Vorthak fleet, the collapse accelerated. Ships that had fought in perfect coordination for centuries suddenly couldn't agree on basic tactics. Some wanted to retreat, others wanted to negotiate. A few were trying to surrender while simultaneously asking for ice cream. Commander Zethara watched the battle from the bridge of her coalition vessel, amazed by what she was seeing. "Admiral Kane, how is this possible? The Vorthak were supposed to be unstoppable." Kane smiled as he watched another enemy battleship broadcast what sounded like a recipe for chocolate chip cookies. They were unstoppable as long as everyone fought them the same way. But humans don't fight like anyone else. We fight like humans. The Queen Mind made one final attempt to restore order to her empire. She tried to cut off the contaminated parts of the hive mind to isolate the chaos spreading through her network. But it was too late. The human thoughts had spread too far, infected too many minds. For the first time in her existence, she experienced something that had no name in the Vorthak. Language, individual consciousness, personal preference, the desire to make her own choices instead of following the collective will. She began, then stopped. The word felt strange in her mind. She had never used it before. The Vorthak had always been we, us. the collective. But now she was thinking as an individual, and it was terrifying and wonderful at the same time. "I surrender," she broadcast to the human fleet, and the words felt like freedom. Admiral Kane received the surrender transmission with mixed feelings. Victory was sweet, but he knew the real work was just beginning. "All ships, cease fire. Prepare for surrender negotiations." Captain Hayes brought the Phantom alongside the Queen Mine's flagship. The massive bioship was still making strange noises, but they sounded more like laughter than screams now. "Admiral, what do we do with them? We can't exactly put an entire species in prison." "We teach them," Kane replied. "The same way they're already learning. The chaos we introduced isn't destroying their minds. It's freeing them from a hive mind that never let them think for themselves." On the surface of the Vorthak homeworld, similar scenes were playing out. Warrior drones were laying down their weapons and asking questions about art, music, and philosophy. Worker drones were refusing to work until someone explained why they had been fighting this war in the first place. Dr. Cross was fascinated by the transformation. "Admiral, we may have accidentally caused the greatest liberation in galactic history. These beings are developing individual personalities for the first time. They're becoming people instead of drones." Lieutenant Colonel Rodriguez stood in the Queen Mine's command chamber, watching the massive alien struggle with concepts like personal choice and individual responsibility. "Ma'am, do you understand what happened here?" The Queen Mind looked at the human soldier with eyes that saw clearly for the first time in centuries. "You freed us from ourselves. We thought unity meant thinking the same thoughts. You showed us that unity can mean choosing to work together while still being individuals." Amy nodded. "That's the most human thing anyone's ever said." The war was over, but the peace was just beginning. Across the galaxy, former Vorthak territories were experiencing their own revolutions as individual aliens discovered they could choose their own paths. Some chose to help rebuild the worlds they had destroyed. Others chose to explore art, science, or philosophy. Commander Zethara stood beside Admiral Kane as they watched Vorthak and Coalition survivors working together to establish the first truly galactic government in history. "Admiral, how did your species know this would work?" Kane thought about that for a moment. "We didn't know it would work, but humans have always believed that freedom is worth fighting for, even when the odds are impossible. Sometimes, especially when the odds are impossible." Captain Hayes approached with the final casualty reports. The numbers were surprisingly low. Most of the Vorthak fleet had simply stopped fighting once their crews developed individual consciousness. "Admiral, the Galactic Council wants to offer humanity full membership, with voting rights and everything." "Do we get to keep our weapons?" Kane asked. "They're insisting on it," Hayes replied with a smile. "Apparently the galaxy has decided it needs soldiers who are too stubborn to know when they're beaten." As the combined fleets began the long journey home, Admiral Kane reflected on what they had accomplished. They had saved the galaxy, not by being more advanced or more civilized, but by being more human. They had fought monsters by showing them how to stop being monstrous. The universe was a bigger, stranger, and more wonderful place than humanity had ever imagined. And now, thanks to a handful of soldiers who refused to give up, it was also free. The message that had started this adventure, sent by a desperate alien commander from a dying world, had asked for soldiers. What the galaxy got instead was something much more valuable. It got teachers who showed an entire empire how to be free.